This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode 25. Welcome to the 25th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I love hearing from you, so if you enjoy today's show, please stop by the blog and leave a comment in the show notes. You'll find the show notes for today's episode and all the podcast episodes at fertilityfriday.com/podcast. And you can find me on the Fertility Friday Facebook page at facebook.com/fertilityfridays. You can also find me on Twitter at Fertile Friday. And I'm so excited to welcome Lily Nichols back to the show today. If you didn't catch the previous episode that Lily and I recorded together, you should definitely take a listen, especially if you're planning to get pregnant at some point or if you're already pregnant. We talked about gestational diabetes in depth and how it can be managed through a real food diet. And I'll be linking episode 16 in the show notes, so make sure to go back and check it out. And if you didn't catch the last episode, Lily is a registered dietitian and nutritionist who specializes in optimizing health with real food and supporting pregnant women to have the healthiest pregnancies possible. She has recently written a book entitled Real Food for Gestational Diabetes, which of course is one of the areas that she specializes in. And Lily is also a certified Pilates instructor. And in today's show, Lily and I will be talking about exercise during pregnancy. So how much is enough, how much is too much, and how to go about doing it for the best results for both baby and mom. So without further ado, welcome back to the show, Lily.
Thank you for having me again.
Oh, no, I was so excited to have you on again. So it was so much fun the first time.
I know.
And so maybe you could tell the listeners a little bit about your background, especially in the area of health and fitness, since you're a Pilates instructor.
Sure. I'll do a slightly different intro than last time because we were talking about the whole medical side of things. But after I did all of my formal nutrition education, I was actually working in a hospital at the time, finishing my dietetic internship, and I was like, I cannot work in a hospital. This is not the place for me. And I want to be helping people more on a general wellness level, not, prescribing a certain number of calories and a modified textured diet to somebody who's stuck in a hospital bed. It was just like, it's just not my cup of tea, Blessings to all the dietitians who actually like being in that setting, but I was like, I gotta get out of here. And I really at the time was enjoying doing Pilates. I had done practice Pilates and yoga since I was a teenager, and I started looking into what it would mean to be a teacher. So I was taking classes at a studio that had all the big Pilates equipment. I don't know if you've ever been to a Pilates studio, but some people say it looks like, medieval torture devices because there's all these big, clunky pieces of equipment. And I was just really fascinated by it. And I started reading some things by Joseph Pilates, the man who created what's now known as the Pilates method, and decided to pursue teacher training. And so that took about a year to become a certified Pilates instructor and learn all of that and really start applying all of there's a lot of crossover between nutrition and exercise because you're often thinking about physiology, but in exercise, we're thinking a lot more about functional movement, engaging certain muscles, the effect of posture on our health. I mean, it's just a really broad and fun field of study. So that kind of led me to where I am today, where I combine both the nutrition and the Pilates. And I found it to come in quite handy to have an exercise background when I started working with pregnant women, because exercise is actually quite good for pregnant women. But a lot of people, I was finding that when I was working for the California Diabetes and Pregnancy Program, not many of the clinicians were familiar with exercise. I mean, a lot of doctors and nutritionists and nurses, they're stuck in a clinical setting. They might not be doing exercise themselves, or at the very least, they haven't taught it. And I was the only person in that organization who had taught exercise to pregnant women and had training in that background. And I found it really came in handy to start putting the pieces together on what types of exercise are safe. I mean, there's so many myths about exercise in pregnancy, and sort of making sense of that information for clinicians, because a lot of the information passed on to pregnant women is really bland. It's like, you can walk during pregnancy, and then they kind of just leave it at that. Or you can't do abdominal exercise during pregnancy, which is a lie. There's some caveats and things you want to take into consideration, but we end up with these broad, really generalized statements about exercise that lose the meaning and aren't necessarily true. So that's sort of how I got into the exercise side of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, no, that sounds really interesting. And when you were talking about how many of the clinicians don't have experience in that area, it would make sense, because unless you were, as you said, trained in that area, you wouldn't necessarily know more than the rest of us, which is walk,
Right.
don't do too
Right.
much.
And your personal exercise experience plays a big role in what clinicians are going to recommend. So if your idea of exercise is, really intense aerobics, and you've like injured your joints doing it before, you're probably going to tell women to ease off of exercise. So
Mm-hmm.
our own exercise background can really color the type of advice that we give, and I think a lot of clinicians kind of aren't necessarily aware that they have their own bias.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense as well. So maybe to kind of get us started, to get our feet wet a little bit in this topic, maybe we could start by talking about why exercise is important and how it actually helps women and the women themselves and the baby during pregnancy.
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, it's actually recommended that pregnant women get, 30 minutes or more amounts of exercise per day if they can, if they don't have complications. So there's pretty broad recommendations for healthy pregnant women are to do something active every day. We know that the benefits outweigh the risks when it comes to exercise, and one of the big benefits is a reduction in blood pressure and blood sugar in pregnancy. So exercise has been associated with a lower risk of gestational diabetes and preeclampsia. Specifically, when it comes to gestational diabetes, they've found that moms who exercise during the year prior to conception, I know you have the whole fertility thing coming on. So women who exercise before they become pregnant, and through 20 weeks gestation, those women had a 49 to 78% reduced risk of gestational diabetes, which is huge.
Yeah, that's
So
huge.
exercise plays a big role in our blood sugar and our blood pressure. It can reduce the risk of excess weight gain during pregnancy, and excess weight gain during pregnancy is linked to all sorts of issues. A lot of people hear about gestational diabetes being linked to women delivering a large baby, but excess maternal weight gain or starting the pregnancy overweight is actually more tied to having a big baby than gestational diabetes. It's kind of crazy.
Hmm.
So exercise, as we know, burns energy, and that's a good thing. That helps keep our metabolism going and helps reduce the risk that the baby's getting too much energy and growing too fast. It tends to increase insulin sensitivity, so that means that's kind of tied into the weight gain side of things and the gestational diabetes side of things as well. So your body is more responsive and able to control your blood sugar levels. If a woman has diabetes in her pregnancy, they'll tend to need fewer, less insulin or no additional insulin. Like if they have to take insulin shots, for example, to control their blood sugar, that risk also goes down. It makes it easier to adjust to some of the changes that your body goes through in pregnancy. So, your belly starts growing, and usually as our body accommodates a growing belly, we tend to shift our posture, and not in an ideal way for most people. A lot of times it makes the low back start to arch, and then you crane your neck forward to counterbalance it, and it strains the hips. It leads to all sorts of imbalance in the body. But women who exercise tend to have a better job adjusting to those changes. It can help strengthen the pelvic floor, which can help make labor a little bit easier. It doesn't necessarily shorten labor, but it does make labor easier. It makes recovery from labor easier if you have some awareness of those pelvic floor muscles. Gosh, the list goes on. Mental health benefits, I mean, less stress, less anxiety, less depression. Women who exercise have better self-image during pregnancy. They sleep better. I think that kind of ties up the majority of the ones for mom. For baby, it's kind of a carryover effect to all the good things that a mom experiences. So exercise helps to increase circulation and nutrient flow to the baby. I mean, you think all the nutrients that are going to that baby are going through the umbilical cord. And if you increase your blood flow or increase your circulation with exercise, you're increasing the nutrient exchange to the placenta and to the baby, which is great. And then, of course, with all the carryover effects on a pregnant woman's metabolism, that actually helps her child's metabolism. So there's a lesser risk of childhood overweight and type 2 diabetes if their moms exercise during pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. That's a ton of benefits. So,
Tons.
And I'm still on the statistic. You said 49 to 78% reduced risk of gestational diabetes and preeclampsia, especially after the episode that we did previously. We didn't really get into how much of an impact exercise can have on that. Mm-hmm. And so that's huge.
Yeah, it's big.
Mm-hmm. And so let's get into the exercise a little bit, because one of the things, I guess one of the questions I had was, what do you typically see when you are working with pregnant women? How much do pregnant women typically exercise?
I'd say it depends a lot on the woman, and that'll depend a lot on what type of practice a clinician happens to be working in. So when I was working in a very low income area at a place that accepts state funded healthcare for people who cannot afford their own healthcare, exercise was not a priority in these women's lives, and for good reason. I mean, they're oftentimes working a lot or working multiple jobs, managing a household, lacking time, lacking the resources sometimes to exercise. So for those women, it's just not even on your hierarchy of needs. Exercise is not that high when you're concerned about affording food for your family. Mm-hmm. So I would say exercise was just not beyond walking. I mean, people who didn't have transportation, who had to walk to get groceries and stuff, they usually did fantastic.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. There's it's income level at a certain point there's probably a J-shaped curve if you're looking at exercise. In private practice, I'd say a lot more of the women that I see exercise. So, and sometimes they can actually take it a bit to an extreme sometimes. I mean, women can go a little overboard with exercise. But when you look at the actual research on are women meeting the laid out guidelines for exercise, which is 30 minutes a day, the latest that I saw was no more than 20% of pregnant women meet that goal. And there's probably a lot of reasons to that, but I mean, even just as you progress through the pregnancy, all the changes that your body goes through. I mean, the first trimester, you might be really tired, you might be fatigued or have morning sickness or nausea all day. Second and third trimester, sometimes as the baby gets really big, it's uncomfortable to exercise. You might have some joint laxity going on where your joints are a little more unstable and exercise just doesn't feel good anymore. So there's a lot of things with exercise that make it challenging to actually meet the 30 minutes a day. So I think we kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, but we do have pretty good evidence showing that, the more active you are, the better.
Mm-hmm. Well, part of the reason I have that question is because there's there's no scientific basis to what I'm about to say. So this is just purely observation, and it's more of a question for you because you've seen
Sure.
much more. But it seems like there's often this like huge disparity. Like either you're like in the gym, like 8 months pregnant, doing Pilates like full out, or
Mm-hmm.
you're not really exercising. And, random people tell me stories like that all the time. Like, I was in the gym the other day and I saw this woman and I didn't even know she was pregnant. She turns around and she was jogging for like 45 minutes. And you know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
one of the questions I have is one of the things I've heard actually is like, okay, you shouldn't necessarily like choose when you get pregnant to start a crazy routine. So, if you had the crazy routine before, you could probably continue to some extent. But maybe if you didn't necessarily do that before, maybe this is not the time to start. So, do you have any comments on that? Is there any validity to that idea?
Um, yes, and I'm going to agree with you on that there are opposite extremes. People always take advice to the extreme. You say like, oh, it's better to eat fewer carbohydrates, and then like, okay, I'll eat no carbs. It's like, wait, that's not what we said. Same thing for exercise. So yes, I do tend to see people go kind of either all out or walk 5 minutes a day. So yeah, that part is kind of challenging. In terms of is it safe to start exercising if you haven't exercised before pregnancy? Generally, the advice is to start slow when you're doing an exercise program. So, I mean, every pregnant woman should get doctor's approval to rule out contraindications. If you don't know you're pregnant yet, I mean, really, you can still do whatever exercise you want. And I mean, most of the time, exercise is going to be safe. But if you have contraindications to exercise and you have, for example, history of preterm labor, it's probably not a good idea to like join a CrossFit gym because you want to have a really healthy pregnancy. I mean, you probably want to get some things ruled out. You want to assess your current level of physical activity so you can start at a place that's comfortable for you to adjust to. I mean, I was just in the post office today, and this is not really related to pregnancy, but this man walked in. He was, at least like 300 pounds. And he had just walked in from his car, 20 steps, and he was wheezing. He was having a really hard time breathing. And I was thinking, oh man, like, what would that feel like in my body? Like, if you're at a level of, if your health is at a place where walking 5 minutes is exhausting, don't walk more than 5 minutes. That is way too much metabolic stress
Mm-hmm.
on your body, But if you're the type of person who can easily go on a 30-minute or hour-long walk and not even notice the time has flown by, it's probably completely safe for you to exercise. So, yes, you want to get doctor's approval. Most of the time, it's safe.
Mm-hmm.
There's very limited and specific reasons that exercise might be unsafe in pregnancy, and we can list them off later on. The other thing would be just learning how to modify certain exercises for pregnancy. So usually first trimester, there's not much to modify, but sometimes in later pregnancy, you want to make some modifications. So for example, if you're doing like stationary bike, like recumbent stationary bike, or some sort of setup where your leg will be hitting your belly, like that's not a good idea. Exercises where you're stuck laying on your back for a long period of time and the weight of the baby is pushing on your vena cava and limiting blood flow and oxygen supply and you're getting dizzy, not a great idea, but these are really easy modifications to make.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like a little, of course, common sense is a really important aspect of this, and kind of being aware of your body, being aware of how you feel. And one of the things I would throw in there, like having been pregnant,
Yes.
is that your body does change. And so it's brought to your attention when you do things that you maybe can't do. And maybe you can do those things, but not to the same extent. Like I know, like for me, when I was getting pretty big, I could go for walks, but I'm a speed walker. I don't know, especially when it's cold outside. It's really cold these days, and I'm not interested. Every time I get into the elevator at work, people are like, "Did you run here or something?" And I'm like, "No, I just walk fast. It's cold outside." But you throw in like a baby in there, and then you try to,
Yeah.
for me anyways, I would try to speed walk, and I would get kind of pangs on, in my belly, just because of the change in your body. So
Yeah.
what I'm hearing from you is you really got to like, don't force yourself. Like maybe before you were pregnant, you would push through the pain or whatever. Maybe
I'm
this
so
isn't the time.
glad. Yeah, I'm so glad you give that example of pushing through the pain because, yes, pregnancy is not a time to push through the pain. And there are very good reasons that you might get more exhausted during the exercise and you might need to modify your routine. You have more blood. You have like an extra liter of blood in your circulatory system, which makes it a lot harder for your body to pump all that blood around. Um, you also have, especially in late pregnancy, the baby's pushing up on your lungs, and that's limiting your lung capacity. It makes it harder to catch your breath. It's easier for you to get overheated. So you just wear out a little faster, you know? Sometimes you can't maintain the same intensity. Some women can, and if they still feel good while doing it, that's probably completely fine. I mean, like you said, women who are athletic before they become pregnant are probably fine to continue at the same intensity unless they have symptoms or contraindications that make them feel otherwise. So it really has to be a woman to woman adjustment. And that's the part that's really tough to explain to healthcare providers. We love numbers and graphs and statistics, and we want like broad-based generalized recommendations that will fit for all women. But it just doesn't work. I mean, like I said, their limit to exercise might be 5 minutes when they first start out. Gradually, we hope that increases. You know, it's not normal for your body to only tolerate 5 minutes of exercise, right? So eventually, one build that up. But there's other women who will be just fine walking, going on an hour and a half walk, or doing Pilates 3 times a week, or the hour and a half walk plus Pilates every once in a while, and that's okay for that woman.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that, I think one of the challenges maybe for women to kind of, some women anyways, to incorporate exercise is, living in our North American society, pregnancy is kind of lumped in with all the other diseases, except that pregnancy isn't a disease and it's not
Right.
a sickness. So obviously some women do encounter serious complications with pregnancy, but I would imagine that the great majority of women who are healthy and, relatively moderate weight or whatever it is, but just that fall in the low risk side of things, they're not sick. You're just pregnant. So
Exactly.
I feel like that whole idea kind of discourages women from maybe undertaking exercise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The challenge, I think, is that we have all this research saying benefits of exercise outweigh the risks. The benefits of exercise outweigh the risks. But then there's always that caveat of check with your doctor to make sure exercise is okay. So if a woman finds out she's pregnant at like 3 or 4 weeks, right? Like right early on, and she's like starts reading online, oh, can I exercise? Can I not exercise? She's probably going to come across information that says don't, and then you probably can't get in to see some doctors don't even want to see you till you're 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks, so they can do a heart rate monitor or something, so they can check for a heartbeat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they're probably reducing their activity because they've been scared off that they think it's going to be harmful, and really most likely it's not going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make because yeah, like, I mean, again, having been pregnant, like, I moved a little slower, but it's not like I couldn't do stuff. Like, I was fine.
Right.
And people
Mm-hmm.
start making a big deal of it too, like, so your partner kind of starts to move things out of the way when you're walking. And I mean, you do have to be careful. You don't want to fall down the stairs or whatever, but
Right. Yes.
at
And
the
we can talk about those sorts of things that you want to take into consideration. It was so funny. I'll just share this funny story. Just of like how oh, what's the word that I want to use? Like liability scared that health practitioners are. I was creating a exercise handout for one of the places I used to work, and I put bicycle on there, like riding their bike. Actually, a lot of our women in that area would come to their appointments via their bike. That was their mode of transportation. And I had to take it off because riding a bike can be dangerous because you can fall, which is true. I mean, you can fall, but I mean,
I'm
you
pretty
can
clumsy. I
also,
can fall walking.
yeah. So I took it off. I put stationary bike. Now, keep in mind, the only reason these women were riding their bike was to get around town, to get to work, to get to, and so I had to put stationary bike, and then I would just kind of get verbally give the caveat, if you're really comfortable riding your bike and you're, not riding in the middle of traffic or in, bad weather conditions or whatever, you're probably fine. There is a risk of falls, so be aware. You could hurt yourself if you fall. But you can be walking or jogging and trip and fall on your belly too. So, I mean, every exercise has some risk of falling, and it's like, that's when we have to go to the risk benefit thing. It's like, okay, what are all the good things that exercise does for us? What are the potential bad things that exercise does for us? Okay, let's make a choice here. I mean, if you're super clumsy and not comfortable on a bike, don't get on a bike. But if you are regularly a cyclist and that's your thing, you shouldn't stop. I mean, come on. It's just sometimes it's all about liability, and that's how some of these guidelines get put into place. So I think we need to take a bit of personal responsibility into what exercises we're going to or activities we're going to engage in, and which ones we're going to decide the risk isn't worth it.
Okay, well, maybe we can throw in some kind of specific examples, even though it might seem obvious. But what are some what are some of the things women can do when they're pregnant? So, can we jog? Can we? Of course, we could do yoga. But like, what are some of the? I guess some examples. So for women listening, they're like, "Well, this sounds great. Like the benefits sound really good. I want to incorporate exercise into my routine. When I'm pregnant or if I'm pregnant.
Yes.
So, what are some of the great things that you would suggest that we could do?"
Sure. And these are ones that almost every medical provider will agree upon. So, non-controversial things. Walking. Everybody agrees that walking is safe unless you have some really serious contraindications. Again, talk to your doctor. 99% of the time, walking is safe. I mean, you have to walk just to move around your house. So, for God's sakes, walk. Swimming is fantastic in pregnancy. It helps alleviate a lot of the stress that's on your joints, and you can kind of feel weightless for a second, which can feel really good. Stationary bike, like I said, or biking if you're comfortable with it. If you go to the gym, an elliptical machine is great. It's especially good if you have some joint issues that makes walking or running too high impact for you. Step aerobics, this is like straight from the 80s. Still, it's good exercise. Moderate hiking, running and jogging. This one can be like a bit controversial because there is a little more risk of joint injury, but women who are used to running or jogging, it's totally fine to continue it in pregnancy. Dancing, again, depending on the intensity of the dancing, you don't want to be, swung around in like some acrobatic kind of a move. Again, risk of falls, but for the most part, dancing is really great. Climbing stairs is fantastic. Those would be probably the more basic, safe aerobic exercises. With strength exercise, if we want to go there, lifting weights is good. Using resistance bands or stability balls is great. Anything that involves balance is usually fantastic in pregnancy. The joints tend to get a little bit looser because there's a hormone that's released in your body in pregnancy called relaxin, which tends to relax, as the name suggests, the ligaments. It allows the pelvis to spread so you can actually birth a baby. I mean, it's kind of cool how it works, but it does make your joints a little more unstable, and especially gives women a lot of pain in their sacrum, like your very low back. And sometimes especially if you already have loose joints, you can more easily hyperextend like your knees or your elbows or your wrists if you're not careful. So you just want to be, that's why the stabilizing type balancing exercises are really great, but you want to be careful if you're lifting weights that you're not going to like full end range of motion and you're hyperextending your wrists or hyperextending other joints. You could injure yourself more easily. Prenatal Pilates, prenatal yoga, again, as long as you know the limits of stretching safely, those are fantastic in pregnancy.
Okay. And yeah, those are some really great options. And I think it's really great to kind of spell it out so that we have a kind of a visual idea of all the different things we could do. Obviously, by the list you gave, it's absolutely not limiting. And it doesn't sound intimidating at all.
And there's more things that fit on the list that are not there. I mean, a lot of activities can be adjusted to fit pregnancy. And the organization that puts out most of the big guidelines that all the obstetricians and gynecologists follow, at least in the US, and the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, called ACOG, they even suggest that a wide variety of activities are safe as long as you take into consideration certain adjustments to make. So things beyond this list are certainly fine.
With the appropriate modification. And it makes perfect sense because, like, again, if it hurts, stop. And
exactly.
Regroup or change your position or whatever. I think that it's pretty common sense, I guess. Right. And one of the questions I want to ask, since we've kind of gone through all the different types of exercises that are appropriate for women when we're pregnant and when we're not, what types of exercises are unsafe? We've kind of touched on it a little bit, but anything in particular that stands out for you?
Sure. And I like to talk about the why rather than giving you a list, so women can kind of expand this to movements or exercises beyond what I'm going to mention here. But one of the main things is and this is so obvious that it's funny to say it, but this explains why so many sports are usually contraindicated. Anything that can risk abdominal trauma. So things like soccer or baseball or football, where a ball is being thrown or kicked or whatever and can hit you in the belly, that's technically not safe. Now, I always say, if you're playing like with family and friends and they know you're pregnant and they're cautious, or it's a family thing, you're probably fine. But again, you want to be cautious with those. Exercises where there's a high risk of falls, such as gymnastics, downhill skiing. If you wanted to, you could include biking on there, right? High risk of falls, that's where you could injure yourself. And then the third thing that's usually avoided are anything that has excessive bouncing or jerking. Because bouncing is usually super uncomfortable when you're, in the later stages of pregnancy, but jerking movements are potentially dangerous because of joint injury. These things aren't jerking. The jerking movement means like exercises where you go from moving really fast to a very quick stop. That's usually when you can go beyond your normal joints range of motion and be more likely to injure it. So be cautious with those things. So things like horseback riding, that has all of the risks altogether, like bouncing, jerking, risk of falls, risk of abdominal trauma, right? Mountain biking wouldn't be great. I don't know that it's particularly contraindicated, but something like jumping on a trampoline would be a lot of bouncing and probably just really uncomfortable. So you probably want to not do those things.
Yeah, I think that's a good list, and it makes a lot of sense. And so one of the questions that I wanted to ask as well is, and we might have touched on this a bit, but then I kind of have a follow-up too that I'm thinking of. But so is there such a thing as too much exercise? So what are the signs that you should back off?
Absolutely. you can't exercise too much. And even women, since I want to circle back to the fertility things, this is useful to moms who aren't pregnant yet. Moms who, or women who over-exercise when they're trying to get pregnant, they actually have lower fertility rates than moms who exercise moderately. So when we're talking about exercise, we're always talking moderately, not these excessive, not like, well, it's hard to say because some women are, elite athletes and they seem to conceive just fine. But there is a higher risk of amenorrhea and infertility in women who are very intense exercisers. So just keep that in mind if that's something you're struggling with. But in terms of when you're actually pregnant, signs to stop exercise would include things like vaginal bleeding or any leakage of fluid from the vagina, such as amniotic fluid. That would be a problem. If you have shortness of breath prior to exertion, so before you're, doing your exercise at your full intensity, if you have shortness of breath before that, that's a problem. You want to stop. If you have shortness of breath in the middle of exercise and you can't maintain even a little bit of a conversation, you're probably exercising too hard and want to back off, by the way. If you have dizziness, headache, or chest pain, that's a sign to stop and reassess. Unexplained muscle weakness beyond like, oh wow, I'm really working this muscle, but like, oh, I can't stand up. That's a problem. Calf pain or swelling. There's actually a potentially problematic inflammatory thing that can happen with that. So you want to caution with that. Preterm labor, if you have a risk of that, or if you feel like you're experiencing preterm labor, you'd want to stop. And then the final thing is decreased fetal movement. So this is something that women would experience later in pregnancy, obviously. But if you're used to feeling the baby move and all of a sudden you're not for an extended period of time, you probably want to stop and just make sure everything's okay. So if any of those things happen, if everything goes back to normal after you stop exercising, generally it's probably fine. You can resume when you feel good. If anything continues beyond when you've stopped exercise, you probably want to call your doctor. And if it's serious, go to the ER, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and this kind of brings me to one of the topics that I wanted to chat with you about today, which is, I guess, you kind of touched on the whole, because you mentioned that for women who are not pregnant, if you're over exercising, then it can impact your fertility negatively. So then that begs the question of, if something is not good for your fertility and then you do it while you're pregnant, the over-exercising part, what could the impacts be? And I guess it brings me to a question, which is, why are you exercising? So are you exercising to feel good, to make sure that you're healthy, to improve the health of your baby, or is it excessive? Because I feel like there's this thing in our culture, probably as a result of the media, because there's all these famous women and they get pregnant, and then like a week after they push out the baby, I guess I'm exaggerating with a week, but like a month or two, they're like in a swimsuit on the beach somewhere. And I just feel like that should not be the goal. The goal should be a healthy baby. And there has to be some middle ground between this crazy, I need to have my perfect pre-pregnancy body immediately. And because I feel like the focus for me and, everything I do on the podcast, I want to shift the focus to healthy. So it doesn't mean like I'm endorsing like never losing the baby weight, but like, can we give ourselves a minute? You just gave life to another human being. Can we really evaluate why we're exercising the way that we are? Because I feel like some women are just really just focused on this post-pregnancy perfect body thing.
And postpartum, really your body needs a time to recover, and what you should be doing is breastfeeding your baby.
Which you're usually sitting down for.
Yeah, right. No other, you don't see any other mammals who, I guess animals are pretty active, but you usually don't see like animals give birth and then immediately go and start running full force, unless they're like, having to run to save their life. But I mean, there usually is a period of downtime and rest, and you need that, and that's okay. So, and also you need, I mean, in general, women usually aren't advised to resume their normal exercise regimen until about 6 weeks. I mean, you want to get clearance from your doctor that everything has healed up normally, especially if you had a more complicated delivery. You might even need longer than 6 weeks. So, yes, you've earned that time of rest. Please rest, for God's sakes. But I completely agree with you in terms of the thinking about exercise in terms of health, because yes, a lot of people's idea of exercise is like, okay, there's sort of like this ultimatum. Okay, I'm going to do whatever workout like 5 days a week, but because if I won't, fill in the blank, something bad will happen. I'm going to be fat. I won't be ready for bikini season. I'll never lose the baby weight. Mirror, mirror, mirror. And instead, if we shift that to, I'm going to fill in the blank, walk 5 days a week, because it helps me feel less stressed, or because I like how it boosts my energy, or because I know it's really good for me and the baby, or because it helps me connect with my partner, or clear my head, or fill in the blank. It shifts the whole idea of why we're doing exercise. And the goal, especially in pregnancy, shouldn't be some sort of physical attribute. It should just be reconnecting with your body as it goes through all these changes and embracing all those changes and doing it with the intention to benefit your health and your baby's health, not to whatever, not have to buy maternity clothes until a certain month. I mean, there's all these ridiculous expectations and that women are either put on women or women bring upon themselves that is just so crazy.
Well, and I remember hearing this random story. So take it with a grain of salt because I don't remember exactly like which specific tribe or which specific group, but it was there was a group of African women where like if they were together and they saw a woman and she didn't have stretch marks, and actually in that particular culture stretch marks were kind of worn as a badge of honor because it meant that you were able to have a baby. And so if a woman ever didn't have stretch marks, they were kind of looked at a little bit with a bit of sadness because it was kind of like, oh, you weren't able to have a baby. And so the whole concept of wanting to have this body that looks exactly like it did before you had the baby, I feel like we all need to take a minute and just think about, what an honor it is to be able to carry a baby, right? And what an honor it is and just the amazing gift it truly is to be able to give life. And your body is going to be different. And maybe that's okay because you had a baby. So like after I pushed out my son, I'm good with the stretch marks I have because like I need something. I went through labor. Like you don't want one of those t-shirts. Like I went through labor and all I got was this t-shirt. Like I'm good with it because
like that, but these lousy stretch marks.
Well, because I mean, I feel like, like there's kind of a movement now, on Facebook, people post pictures of their postpartum bodies with pride because these stretch marks are kind of like, they're like war wounds. Like I'm so proud of these because this is what allowed me to have my child.
Exactly.
And so if anything, we can at least throw that idea out there into the world and maybe shift the consciousness a bit because I wouldn't want my pre-pregnancy body back because pre-pregnancy I didn't have my child.
Right. Oh, I love that. I love that perspective. Yeah, you have to look at it in terms of, how is this habit going to serve you as a person, not a how is this going to make me fit into some mold that everybody else has told me I need to fit into, whatever that mold is. And there's two sides to all of these, to the exercise thing for sure. And there's the people who don't exercise at all, maybe because they don't want to or don't know it's safe. And then there's the women who take it to this crazy extreme for any number of reasons, but I think a lot of them are motivated more by um, trying to fit some ideal, whatever that is, rather than a habit that's serving themselves,
Mm.
serving your body rather than punishing it.
Well, and of course, there, like, I guess I don't mean to come across for women who do exercise a lot. I mean, everyone's different. And so everyone knows their own body and their own limits. And there's tons of women that can exercise at a high level to later stages of their pregnancy and
Yep.
resume their pre-pregnancy body, in a healthy way, quite soon. And that's great too. I think as long as you're checking in with yourself and you're, just not overdoing it. I feel like that's my only kind of health concern. I mean,
Yes.
make sure that whatever you're doing, like if you can do it at a higher level and you feel great and baby feels great, like that's awesome. And I hope to be to be at that level. That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if
A
you're
friend of
not,
mine,
don't force yourself into it.
exactly. A friend of mine is a doula, and she's worked a lot with athletes. I think she's actually putting together a book called Birth Like an Athlete, which I can't wait to read. I think it's going to be really
Wow.
interesting because it's going to follow. I mean, the studies on exercise and pregnancy, since I've just very recently been re-delving into the research, it's fascinating because there's um, the 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 data is either kind of like these very small groups of women who are given a certain exercise to do, and they monitor, the parameters of what's going on in their system for that duration of that exercise, or it's very broad based, like survey of how many minutes you exercise, or it's these studies of athletes. There's actually some really interesting studies on athletic pregnant women, because they have the extra concern, and a lot of times it's, like elite athletes who are doing competitions. They have this concern of like being able to perform or return to their previous level of performance postpartum. I mean, they have a totally different goal than the average pregnant woman who just wants to have a healthy baby and get on with life, you
Hmm.
know. Um, so there's kind of this gap, I think, in the research of women who exercise at a little more of a moderate pace and getting, I don't know. I mean, they're covered a little bit, but I think it'd be interesting to see some different types of studies.
Hmm. I think one of the interesting things that could come out of studies that do study women that are at higher levels of exercise, athletes, would probably be the capacity that women actually have. So I think it would probably shatter the myths around what you can and cannot do.
Right.
Because of course your average woman who works at a fairly sedentary job and isn't running miles and marathons and lifting lots of heavy weights and doing
Right.
CrossFit 5 times a week, if you put her at that level, she probably wouldn't do well because her body isn't used to it. Whereas if you have a woman that's at this optimum, prime, crazy athletic level, it would be interesting to see what she's capable of, and
Right.
just to kind of shatter those myths about what women can't do in pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, I mean, if you are a pretty well-trained athlete and you have great core strength and great, control over your joint mobility and all these things, you can cope with the demands that pregnancy places on your body much easier than a woman who's not, used to exercising. And you can cope with labor a lot easier. I mean, labor is just this incredible and oftentimes long and exhausting process. And if you are at a physical fitness level where you're used to, having your heart rate up and working really hard, and you tend to do better through labor as well. It tends to be a little bit less traumatic on your body.
Hmm. One of the things I noticed when I was very pregnant was I started losing my balance. And I used to do ballet like 100 years ago. And so during, if anyone out there has done ballet, like it's all about like core strength. And so your muscles always have to be like flex. Like ballet is really hard. People think it's like tutus and stuff, but yeah, there's a bit of that, but it's like a ton of muscle strength. Anyways, my
Yeah.
point is that like I always had like a ton of core strength. And so the part of the whole ballet is like the whole time you're doing anything, you always have your tummy sucked in. So to this day, I still have posture, right? Because it was trained. So then I get pregnant and then I'm like big and my belly's sticking out. And all of a sudden, like my abdominal muscles move because that's what happens, right? They like spread out and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I didn't have as much core strength that it was really bizarre because I didn't have as much core strength. I was not balancing properly and I
Yeah.
more likely to fall down at the best time to. So anyways, I could see how being in being in shape and exercising would
Yeah.
help give you more muscle control, especially given that your ligaments are looser as well. Like, can only help.
Exactly. Exactly. And did you end up having diastasis recti? Did you have the abdominal splitting or no?
I don't think so. I probably would have known if I did have it. I just
Probably would have known.
felt some
Well,
changes.
that's a good testament to your ballet background because some women get that splitting of the rectus abdominis, the like six-pack muscles that run vertically.
Oh, yeah.
They get it splits right down the middle as they get, to a certain stage in pregnancy and their belly grows really big. And some doctors say it's from doing too many abdominal exercises, but it's really improper engagement of the abdominal muscles that leads to diastasis recti. And if you're the type of person who has learned to maintain really good posture and draw your belly button in and up and lift your waistline, the muscles you're engaging are the transversus abdominis that run sort of around all the way from the lower back around the belly and back again. And they're kind of like this inner corset or like your internal maternity support, so to speak. And they keep those muscles, the rectus abdominis, the vertical ones, from separating. So it's a really good, you're a good testament to practicing that for your posture and then not having that whole issue come about as well. Because it definitely, you won't feel the same engagement, but you'll still be able to engage those abdominal muscles. I have a really interesting section in my book on exercise, and I convinced one of my friends who was full term at the time that I was just finishing up my book to take some photos with bad posture and good posture, and I put them in the exercise chapter. She was such a sport. She was like 40 weeks and 3 days pregnant. She was awesome. Like, overdue. Overdue in quotes, because that's a whole nother story. That she was just so pregnant and done with it, and it was. She was awesome. I'm so glad she helped me out. But the crazy thing is, I put the photos right next to each other, and one's with bad posture, and she's kind of hunching over, and her belly is sort of hanging out, and her weight's sort of falling forward in response to the belly hanging forward, and then so she's counterbalancing, and her posture is just all crooked. And then there's one of her with good posture. She's using her abdominal and back muscles to lift and hold the baby up. Her spine is aligned. Her neck is nice and long and in line right over her shoulders. Everything is just aligned. And the crazy thing is, she looks less pregnant with the good posture. I had a friend look at this the other day and she was like, wow, was this taken when she was like 6 months pregnant and that's 9 months pregnant? And I was like, no, did you read the description? I said these were taken just minutes apart. And you can see the difference in how she's holding herself. And even as we were doing the photos, she was like, oh God, when she's holding the bad posture, my back hurts, man, this is really uncomfortable. And then, checking in with herself with good posture. It does take some work. You have to think about it and you have to remind yourself to get to that place of good posture. But when you're in that place, it feels really good. It feels much easier to stay in that position for longer than when you're just kind of hanging out in your joints and letting your joints support you instead of your muscles.
Yeah, I can totally attest to that because, like I said, like the ballet thing, like it's ridiculous because it's so ingrained in habit. But yeah, like what you said about how if you suck in versus if you don't suck in, yeah, huge difference. Like if you engage your abdominal muscles versus if you don't, huge. Like you just cut a month off your pregnancy is what you did.
Exactly. And of course, we don't want to be like always walking around with their stomach sucked in. I think sucking in sometimes makes people think that you're like, I don't know if you ever did this as a kid. You would like suck in your belly as much as you can, so
Yeah.
you'd look like really emaciated and be like, Mom, look how
Yeah.
skinny I am. You don't want to do that
No.
because you can't breathe. I mean, you can't maintain that during any movement. So it's a bit more subtle, and it's more about drawing the belly button in and then drawing it up rather than just like, ugh,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, you're not trying
so,
to squash the baby. It's more of
right.
it's just engagement. I think it's like I don't know how to explain it, but anyways,
It's
I'm doing
definitely
it right
engagement.
now.
It's think of it as a gentle hug.
Yeah. So I have a few questions to end the show today. I have one random silly question.
Sure.
So here goes. Um, Again, when I was pregnant, with my son, I was probably like, yeah, I'm a little bit of a nut. So I was probably like 6, 7, I don't even know, 6, 7 months, let's say. And my girlfriend and her husband had just moved into their new house, and we were helping out or whatever. And they didn't have any furniture in their master. And I was like, "Oh, your master is so big." And I did a cartwheel. Needless to say, that was probably the only cartwheel I ever did during pregnancy, because afterwards I did feel so hot. I was like, maybe that wasn't the best idea. So that brings me to my silly question. So, um, upside down things when you're pregnant, bad idea?
They are generally is it gonna is it gonna be unsafe and end your cause like a spontaneous abortion or something? No, but it's generally not recommended to do a bunch of stuff upside down or a bunch of stuff where your hips are above your heart, at least in late pregnancy, because that can put weight, kind of like the laying on your back thing. It can put weight on your vena cava and limit blood flow and limit your oxygen and nutrient supply temporarily. So if you do stuff upside down, I just wouldn't hold it for an extended period of time, because you probably are more likely to get a little bit dizzy and cut off your oxygen supply than not. That being said, I've definitely seen pictures of women doing upside down yoga poses during pregnancy. So, if that floats your boat, that's fine and you don't have any ill effects, okay. But in general, it's not something we recommend women start doing just because they're pregnant.
Yeah, good call. And so for women who are listening and they are concerned about their weight, I think all women, regardless, to some extent, are concerned about their weight, whether it's the pre-pregnancy weight, the weight that you put on during pregnancy, and obviously the weight that you still have after you've given birth. So for any women listening who are concerned about their weight in any way, shape, or form, I guess what advice, it's a big topic, and we could do an entire podcast just on that, but
We could.
um I guess to kind of just give some general guidelines or just some general wisdom about how kind of exercise and diet would interplay to optimize our weight, so we don't put on too much or too little or anything like that.
Right, right. Well, if at all possible, if you have the luxury of planning your pregnancy, I highly, highly recommend, if you're overweight, trying to come down to a healthier weight before you conceive. It just greatly reduces a variety of risk factors during your pregnancy. So if that's something that's within your control, awesome. If you're already pregnant, I would talk to your doctor about where your weight is now, because they usually look at your pre-pregnancy weight in relation to your height. Most doctors just do a BMI, body mass index calculation, which isn't the greatest thing in the world, but I mean, it's a really easy measure for them to do, to look at, are you at a normal weight, overweight, or beyond that? And that will kind of guide the weight gain goals during pregnancy. So women who start the pregnancy at a healthy weight, generally the 25 to 35 pounds of weight gain is ideal. And then women who are a little heavier, women who are overweight, they usually say, 15 to 25 pounds, maybe 15 to 20. And if you start at a much heavier weight, say you have, oh gosh, I'm 60 pounds above where I should be, where I feel healthy, then you might benefit from an even lower amount of weight gain during the pregnancy. And that's something that's obviously very woman to woman. So you'd want to check with your doctor and see what they recommend when it comes to weight gain. But in terms of exercise as a tool for weight loss, it's helpful. If we're talking pre-pregnancy or postpartum, it's helpful to improve weight loss, but it's more the metabolic stuff that goes on in your body that it's improving more than the weight. I mean, good nutrition is more associated with weight loss than exercise. So you can't exercise yourself out of a bad diet. So don't eat a bunch of junk food and then go kill yourself in the gym thinking that, you're just going to burn it off, so to speak. You're still deprived of nutrients and your metabolism is still not going to be optimal because of the food that you're putting into your system. But as a adjunct, movement is obviously a good thing, and it's going to help improve your blood sugar levels, which directly influences your weight. It's going to improve your blood pressure. It's going to improve your strength and your stamina. And it also is just going to make you feel good. I mean, exercise has a bunch of great benefits on our self-esteem, especially exercises associated with good posture and opening your chest up. If you've ever looked into Amy Cuddy's work on power posing, we can decrease stress hormones like cortisol and increase, in a safe and good way, testosterone, which helps us feel more confident and powerful. We do that through exercise where we're doing it with good posture and an open chest. So I'd say the benefits are a bit more carryover. I wouldn't try to do exercise just as a single focus on making up for, not eating super great.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, because I feel the power of diet is very, very important, obviously. And at some point I'll have to do a show about weight loss and talk about that, because like you said, you can't exercise yourself out of a bad diet. I think that's brilliant.
Yes.
And so a few final questions. Is there one, just one? Yeah, right. Is there one myth about nutrition in general that drives you particularly crazy, or that you'd like to see changed?
Oh gosh. Did you ask me this last time? Because now this is coming up. Okay, I'm just going to choose one randomly, and I can't remember if I talked about it last time or not, but this whole idea that we need to count calories, horrible, horrible myth that needs to die. So there's a post on my website, and I'm going to have, angry dietitians writing me like, no, everybody should count calories. There's a post on my website called 6 Reasons to Stop Counting Calories and 11 Things to Do Instead. And there's a lot of reasons that counting calories is really not a great way to spend your time, other than it's obnoxious to count them and keep track of all this stuff and carry a calculator with you all day. But just the short end of it is, labels are not always 100% true. They can lie. They can legally vary 20%. So again, doesn't matter. Nutrients are going to vary by season, variety, ripeness, a whole number of factors. So even our nutrition tables, if you're looking up real food in there, they're not going to be perfect. There's 20 different, I'll just say this, I know there's more, but say there's 20 different varieties of apples. We don't have all those varieties of apples with their calories mapped out. So again, it's inaccurate. And then the whole idea that eating more calories is going to make you gain weight is a lie. It's not exact science. Some calories are processed in our bodies different from other calories. It's not the calories that matter, it's the quality of the food. We don't even absorb all the calories we eat. Like certain foods that are in their whole form, like almonds, for example, they've studied, we don't absorb all the calories from almonds because our body never even fully digests and gets access to them, or the bacteria in our gut metabolize them. So it's just this whole, we spend so much time talking about calories and so little time talking about the quality of our food. And if I could do one thing, it'd just be to kind of let us lay off the calorie thing for a while and instead start looking at quality. Because 100-calorie pack of junk food is junk food. It's not magically okay because it's 100 calories. 100 calories of avocado is not equal to 100 calories of soda. It's different in your system. So,
Yeah.
so rant and rant.
It's so funny because it's so obvious, but yet still it it's so obvious that eating, like your example of avocado versus drinking a soda, like it's clearly obvious that these things are different.
Right.
Except that we still kind of are enslaved by this calorie stuff. So yeah, great.
Yeah, and if you get stuck in the calorie counting world, and especially if it's worked short term to help you lose weight, I mean, you can kind of almost get stuck in like calorie jail where you're constantly, I really do believe it leads to a lot of disordered eating and full-blown eating disorders because it kind of creates this whole obsession. And I talk about this in that article on my site. It disconnects you from your um, your inner body's cues around food. You become like, okay, well, I have this many calories for this meal, and then you have to count everything up, and oh my gosh, I've gone over. Oh no, I'm a bad person. I'm gonna gain 2 pounds, or oh, I've gone under. Ooh, I can have that 100-calorie pack now. It's like, well, what does your body say? Are you hungry? Are you not hungry? When I've personally done check-ins with myself just out of curiosity on calories, by the way, I hate it. I could do it for like a day and then I'm like, I'm never going to do this again. But when I have done that, I'm like, I find myself not paying attention to what's in front of me and instead focusing on the numbers. Like, oh God, even as somebody who knows all this stuff, I can get to the place of being like, oh, well, I can't believe I just ate 800 calories at that meal. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of food. Where if I was just eating what's in front of me and not worrying about the numbers, it doesn't matter the number of calories in front of me. If those 800 calories were really filling, I might not be hungry for another 4 hours. And
Mm-hmm.
that was a great nourishing meal. But when you get stuck on the numbers, all this guilt and shame and judgment and all this crap comes in. I just think it's an over relied upon tool that I think is useful in some settings, useful for people to occasionally check in, or useful when you're working with a clinician, or useful if there's some serious medical condition going on. But for a day-to-day way to manage our food, I think it should be retired.
Well, and one of the things that you said at the very beginning was short term, like if you've experienced some short term success with it, and at the end of the day, for me, I tend to look at things in terms of, what kind of habit can I incorporate into my life and actually maintain on a daily basis. That's usually what I'm looking for. When I'm looking to make changes, it's something that I want to do, something that I can see myself being capable of continuing on. And I
Right.
don't, for me, I know it's not sustainable. Like I like food. I like to eat. I enjoy the taste of food. I definitely try to find the healthiest options. But at the end of the day, counting calories and obsessing over it would take away the joy. Let's just put it that way. So it's not something that I would see as sustainable. And so you might, like when you're really focused on it and you're, totally neurotic about counting all that stuff, yeah, you can lose the weight. But then what happens when you stop, right? So it's not really
Right.
sustainable.
Exactly.
And last question of the day, is there one myth about exercise and pregnancy that you would like to see corrected?
Ooh. I'm gonna pick a complicated researchy one, because I like complex researchy stuff. Okay. There is this, and this might only speak to the clinicians, but I'm sure there's some moms who are really into researching this stuff who will kind of freak out about this, and you have to dig a while to get at the truth. So there's this idea that in pregnancy, maternal exercise can be dangerous because it's going to either change the heart rate of the baby or reduce blood flow to the fetus. So let me give you the truth on both of those things. In terms of heart rate, the fetal heart rate does increase when a mom exercises, but it drops back to baseline levels once a mom finishes exercising. So it's really not a problem. Second, they've actually shown regular exercise results in increased fetal heart rate variability. And that's actually a good thing because that's associated with normal development of the autonomic nervous system in the baby. So it's a good thing that the baby's heart rate will change with exercise. We should stop getting freaked out. And then the final point about the blood flow to the fetus, yes, the uterine blood flow does go down slightly as a mom's heart rate goes up, but oxygen delivery actually remains unchanged because there's all these compensatory reactions within the body, including a slight increase in hematocrit, and the uterus becomes more efficient at extracting oxygen when that occurs. So baby is just fine with exercise. Myth busted.
It sounds like Mother Nature is in control once again.
It's just so, it's almost comical how obvious some of this stuff is because we get all bent out of shape because this study found, the blood flow is slightly reduced. Oh no, it's terrible for the baby. It's like, all right, let's go back a few thousand years and, we're women just laying out, doing nothing for 10 months.
Yeah, I know.
Of course not. They were always active. Were they exercising to try to attain some ideal body type? Of course not. They were exercising to get their work done and get food and so
they didn't have to exercise. They did manual labor, so
yes, you just went about your day, which was quite active.
My mom grew up in that generation where she used to wash clothes like by hand, like outside. There's some exercise for you.
Yeah, that's exhausting actually. With
right?
The whole old-fashioned washboard.
Yep,
and all that.
washboard and everything.
Oh gosh.
Yep.
We're so lucky to have washing machines.
I know. All right. Well, thank you again. This has been a lot of fun. And for all the listeners, the book is Real Food for Gestational Diabetes, which of course I'll be linking to in the show notes. And so Lily, maybe you can tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you.
Sure. You can find me 2 places on my main blog, pilatesnutritionist.com. And if you want to hear specifically about gestational diabetes stuff or learn more about my book, you can go to realfoodforgd.com.
Awesome. Well, Lily, thank you so much for coming back to the show. This was an awesome podcast, and we really delved into exercise and touched on nutrition a little bit, but that was such valuable information. I learned so much. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. Caught you at the perfect time.
So
since you just, as you were saying, you had just prepared all of this information. So it's totally fresh in your mind, just like you said.
Exactly. Well, by this time, that presentation will be done, but I'm sure I'll be doing another professional lecture. So there'll be a few hundred more medical providers who will already know this information by the time the podcast goes live, which is fantastic. We get correct information in the hands of clinicians and moms.
Wonderful. And all is right in the world. All right. Well, thanks again, Lily. It was great. And we'll definitely be in touch. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. If you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, just search for Fertility Friday on iTunes or Stitcher and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And of course, if you're loving the show, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes, especially so that more people can find the show. And as for me, you can find me on Twitter at Fertile Friday. You can stop by the blog and leave a comment in the show notes for today's episode, which you'll find at fertilityfriday.com/Lily2, so Lily and the number 2. And you can also find me on the Fertility Friday Facebook fan page, which is facebook.com/fertilityfridays with an S. So thanks again for listening. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.